On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, P&O Ferries fire 800 of their UK crews and staff. I'm your host, Sal Mercagliano, and welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. So usually I am pretty even-handed. I like to present the news objectively to you, present facts, and keep my own personal opinions and emotions out of the news. That's going to be difficult today because the story I'm giving to you has really pushed my buttons a bit. And I'll be sure to clarify at what point I deviate from presenting facts and news to you and when my emotions get the best of me. I think you'll figure out it on your own. If you haven't had an opportunity yet, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new stories. Let's go ahead and look at this story. So this is the story on G Captain on March 17th. Reuters posted it. P&O Ferries sack 800 crew in major fleet shakeup. British P&O Ferries made 800 staff redundant with immediate effect and suspended crossings for the next few days, sparking a backlash from politicians and unions who criticized plans to hire cheaper agency workers. The shock move caused delays around Britain's busiest port, Dover, and drew threads of a standoff as trade unions urged their members to defy any instructions to leave P&O ships. P&O's move was immediately condemned by unions and described as a public relations disaster on social media. Just want to go and cover this on the other aspects. This is another story there. This one's by Mike Schuller. Union slams P&O Ferries, abrupt mass sacking of seafarers. And then this story right here. Protesters gather at UK ports after P&O sacks ferry crews. So what I'm talking about here are P&O, Peninsular and Oriental Lines ferries, specifically ferries that operate from the British Isles to Ireland to the continent. This notice went up on the P&O website announcing that there will be significant disruptions across P&O ferry services for the next few days and that they would resume service fairly shortly. This is their route map. You'll see they operate between the British Isles, so from Hull to Rotterdam in the Netherlands, from Dover to Calais in France, and from Liverpool to Dublin and Carnarvon to Larne in Ireland, between Ireland, Scotland, and Ireland and England. So these ferries are different than what you would think of as ferries maybe in the United States. These are large ferries, and I mean fairly good-sized ferries. Here's an image of them that you can take a look at right here. Let me go ahead and resize this so you can see it a little better. These ferries are pretty substantial in size. Ships like the Pride of Burgundy, the Pride of Canterbury, the Pride of Kent, the Spirit of Britain, Spirit of France, fairly large vessels. One of the things you'll notice is particularly of the larger ones operating on the Dover to Calais route, they have been reflagged as of 2019 from the British flag over to Cyprus. And that's going to be a key point. This all has to do with Britain leaving the European Union, what's known as Brexit, and the fact that since 2020, P&O ferries have been losing money. And the loss of money has caused P&O Ferries and their parent company, Dubai DP World, to go ahead and conduct a shift. The issue I have here isn't the economics. I understand shipping economics better than anybody. And I understand what they're trying to do is shed employees who are costing their company, in their opinion, more money, and they're going to replace them with foreign crews that they can pay a fraction of a cent less. My issue, and the issue that we should all have, has to do with how the crews were informed of this. So on March 17th, that morning when they announced that P&O was suspending service, the employees of P&O, the mariners working on the ferries and staff working ashore, received an email alerting them to a Teams meeting. Not every employee got that. Not everyone got into the meeting. However, the meeting, they were greeted by this recording. And it was a recording, it wasn't live, but this is the recording. I'm going to play it to you. This is from P&O Ferries office informing their employees of what's going to happen next.
The company has made the decision that its vessels going forward will be primarily crewed by a third-party crew provider. Therefore, I am sorry to inform you that this means your employment is terminated with immediate effect on the grounds of redundancy. Your final day of employment is today.
I'm trying to use the correct words. And in case you're not clear yet, the moment when I lose objective perspective is right now. They tuned into a meeting where a recording from a gentleman basically informed them that they are going to be replaced by third-party crews, in other words, cheaper crews. And they are deemed to be, the term was redundant. Now, let me be clear, they were not redundant until you hire these new crews. Up to this point, they were essential. But now that you're hiring cheap foreign crews to come in because you've reflagged the vessels from English flag, where England has left the European Union, to Cyprus flag, where under that you can use cheap foreign crews from the European Union. Now you've deemed them to be redundant, and you have deemed them to be no longer employed. And the way you announce termination for employees, by the way, who in some cases have worked for your company for 20 to 30 years, is to tell them in a video message. Now, again, I always like to be sure to be clear when I deviate from facts and information to my own personal opinion. This is my personal opinion. I understand the economics. I understand the shipping issue here. What I don't understand is who in their right mind, including the gentleman who talked to that, the people at P&O, the people at DP World, the Home Office, who came up in a meeting and sat there and said, this is the best way to do that. And I want to share my perspective, which I think, and I'm going to be a bit presumptuous here. I'm going to say my view is maybe shared by the 800 members you just fired, their families, friends, associates, and perhaps any human being with a heart beating. When I tell you, F you, seriously, I'll use my British term, bugger off. The fact that you did that was so inhumane during this period of time, especially when, by the way, P&O Ferries had been suffering because of COVID. There's no doubt about that no one's been traveling as much. But in a normal year, they moved 10 million people between the British Isles. They move 15% of the cargo that comes into the British Isles on P&O Ferries. And now they've decided to basically fire, again, crews that have been with the company, in some cases for up to 30 years. And they do it with a video message. And again, the only term I can think to say to those people who make that decision, who think that's the right corporate way to do this, is again, F you. All right, let me take a step back here for a second and gather my composure here. P&O, Peninsula and Orient lines, have been around for a long time. As you see here from pnoheritage.com, you can go all the way back to the 1830s and see the history of this company. Been around for an extremely long period of time. And the company has been really the bedrock by which the British sea power has been built. We tend to think it's the Royal Navy that builds British sea power, but I would disagree in some ways. The Royal Navy comes about because of the British commercial merchant marine. It's the fact that P&O establishes, along with other lines, a worldwide service is the reason that British Royal Navy is built to protect and sustain it. In many ways, the only reason that the Royal Navy can even sustain itself and maintain itself is because entities like P&O established bases, ports of operating, coal deposits, and connected what was then the British Empire together into one coherent entity. And P&O lines has been one of those key bedrocks, I would argue. Now, P&O, the ferry service, was established in the late 1960s to service, again, routes between largely the continent and Europe. They basically continued into the late 80s and 90s. There was a series of efforts to increase it. In the mid 80s, they purchased parts of European financial holdings in European ferries. They got involved in a few very, very high profile disasters, unfortunately, particularly in March of 1987 with the Herald of the Free Enterprise sinking. But over time, P&O really became a bedrock. They combined with Stena Lines there, and they were doing really, really well. But in 2006, the P&O Group basically was sold to the Dubai-based DP World. And shortly thereafter, it was taken over by Dubai World. And today, Dubai World is the entity that controls P&O Ferries. But I want to raise a point about P&O Ferries that is really important. The firing of these employees obviously has huge elements of importance. You're firing crews who have been with this line for extremely long period. You're basically severing British personnel sailing and on board, but there's also a massive national security element here. So one of the things I argue a lot, my doctoral dissertation was on this, was the role of the merchant marine in national defense. And one of my arguments for a nation to have a national merchant marine is so that in times of war, conflict, and emergency, you have a core element that you can call upon and be used in those situations. I will argue with many people, particularly the Cato Institute. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Cato, they're a lobbyist group in Washington, D.C. They also sell home goods, too. They have stores everywhere. It's strange that they do both. Anyway, the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. is a staunch opponent of what's called the Jones Act, the domestic U.S. merchant marine. And they have waged a campaign for nearly 4 years now to get it overturned. And one of the arguments I say about the Jones Act is we need it for national security. And they will poo-poo that idea quite a bit. I will give you the P&O Ferries argument. 1982, the Falklands War. Argentina invades the Falklands and the British decide to sail south. They lack the requisite amphibious vessels to land both the Marines and the Army down in the Falklands. What they need are vessels that can house vehicles, equipment, and personnel. And the ferries were the best solution. And not only did the ferries head south to the Falklands, but many of the crews, the British crews, sailed on board them and took them south. And as this image shows you right here, sailed into San Carlos Bay during the amphibious assault and was attacked by Argentine aircraft, bombs, missiles, and gunfire. These were civilian crews who took these vessels into harm's way. And with the decision by P&O Lines now to recrew these vessels, put on board foreign crews who will have no allegiance whatsoever to the British government. And if case of war, if you want to take these vessels, you can't. They're Cyprus right now. They're no longer British flagged. You have, I would argue, fundamentally hurt your national security. And these issues, beyond just the pure, again, human aspect, need to be examined. And whenever anyone does something like this, and I know there's stories about P&O Ferries right now, and you can go see them, and I'm sure they're great and objective and everything like that. But this really pisses me off. I'm sorry. It's the way I feel. I warned you there was going to be some salty language in this video. But the treatment of mariners, particularly mariners, by the way, who served and worked throughout COVID, ensuring that people could still travel that needed to travel. And more importantly, goods were getting to the British Isles. Again, 15% of all goods to the British Islands travel on P&O ferries. And now to be summarily dismissed and fired, and the way they were fired with a video that morning and then told you're redundant. I only hope, and it's not just me, I'm sure there's 800 other people who share the same thing with me, that when your time comes, Mr. on the video, and the bosses at P&O Ferries and at DP World that did this, I hope that when you are relieved of your job and told your employment is no longer needed, you are treated in a better way and not told you're redundant. I'm just kidding. I kind of hope you get the same exact thing because I think you deserve it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos. Leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, share it across social media. Please share this video with P&O Ferries, DP World, and anyone who still is in the position of leadership so that they can get the opinion of myself of what they did. I have nothing but admiration and respect for all the mariners and staff at P&O Ferries. I know the job that you all do. I know how difficult it is at time. I know that you're away from your families for periods of time. You ensure the sea lanes are kept open. And for that, I salute what you do. And don't let what corporate entities do diminish the service you've given all these years. Till our next video, Sal, signing off.